The Chicago Blackhawks bring back Louis Crevier and add goaltender Stanislav Berezhnoy. I'll break down where both of them fit for the 25-26 season.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Check me out on X at Jack Bushman2, but make sure to follow my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And one quick shout out goes out to today's sponsor as well, which is FanDuel. Make sure to check out FanDuel.com/lockedon right now to get $150 worth of bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins all throughout the summer. All right, Blackhawks fans, before diving into segment one on today's show, wanted to first open things up with a quick happy birthday to none other than Mr. Connor Bedard, who's no longer a teenager as of today, turning 20 years old. So happy birthday, Bedsy. I hope you're having an enjoyable birthday wherever it may be. Have a feeling he's probably on the ice, though, knowing the type of sicko and hard worker that he is. But Connor Bedard turning 20 years old here today. Kind of crazy at the same time how quick time flies. Well, at the same point in time, he's also not even old enough to still have a drink, and it feels like he's been around for quite a while. So I think it serves as a reminder that he's still a very young lad, and us Blackhawks fans, well, we want to see him absolutely dominate right here, right now. We need to remain patient with he and the rest of the prospects in the organization. But one more time, happy 20th birthday to the face of the franchise, Mr. Connor Bedard. But opening things up here on today's show, Blackhawks fans, a couple of signings, believe it or not, that I got to get into. First, the Blackhawks signed 22-year-old Russian goaltender Stanislav Berezhnoy to a 2-year entry-level contract yesterday, just a couple of hours after he was traded to Dynamo Moscow from St. Petersburg, where he ended up having his contract terminated. He's been on the move quite a lot recently over in Russia. Opened up the season with Avangard Omsk's VHL club, then got traded to St. Petersburg for the second half of the season, as I'll get into there. Played really well with SKA and actually wound up making his KHL debut, but ultimately got traded to Dynamo Moscow, and then for whatever reason, he ended up getting his contract terminated. Just a couple hours after that, it was reported that the Blackhawks were showing interest in him, and not too much longer down the road, they ended up inking him to his entry-level deal. 2 years with a $975,000 AAV. Berezhnoy is a 6'4", 218-pound goaltender who's bounced between the VHL, the MHL, is the top junior league over in Russia, and the VHL, the second tier professional league behind the KHL. These last couple of seasons, really since 2022, 2023 as a 19-year-old. But this past season, he was fully in the VHL and had a really strong season. First with Avangard Omsk, he was 6-7-1, but with a 2.51 GAA and a .926 save percentage in 14 games. He then gets dealt to St. Petersburg, winds up performing really well with them. Also goes 6-3-1 with a 2.49 GAA, .931 save percentage, and 1 shutout in 13 games of action. So altogether, a really sound season for him in both of those spots, totaling a 12-10-2 record with a 2.50 GAA, .928 save percentage, and 1 shutout. And he also was coming off of a really impressive season the year prior in his first full campaign in the VHL, had a 2.88 GAA and .914 save percentage. So good first year at that professional level. Then we saw the development continue here this past season. And now he's part of the Blackhawks organization, like I said, after getting his contract terminated over in Russia. The question with Berezhnoy, obviously, though, joining on with the Blackhawks, they have a pretty crowded goaltender group as it is. So certainly wasn't expecting the organization to make another ad in this department, but kind of picturing how things are shaping out at this point in time, looks like Spencer Knight and Arvid Soderblom are expected to be the 1-2 tandem for the Blackhawks this year. Soderblom still needing to get his deal done as an RFA. We'll see when that winds up getting finished here this summer. And then there's also Laurent Brossoit, though. He's kind of the real curveball and wrinkle into all of these plans, because at this point in time, we still don't know exactly what the injury was that forced him to miss not only all of last season, but he was like never even really on the ice practicing with the Blackhawks. From the multiple sources that I've reached out to, no one really has any update on Brossoit. But the last time we heard Kyle Davidson talk about him was during his exit interview, and he said that if Brossoit is healthy, he'd like him to compete for the Blackhawks' backup goaltender job. But considering just kind of where that would move everyone else in the organization at the goaltender position, I just feel like the Blackhawks probably wouldn't have added Stanislav Berezhnoy, who it feels like he's probably going to be in the mix for the Rockford IceHogs backup job next year. Not that they need to like hold him in the highest regards compared to someone like, Drew Commesso, or if Arvid Soderblom did happen to have to go down to the AHL because Brossoit winds up being the backup, it's not the end of the world if Berezhnoy isn't getting a lot of opportunities there. But I still feel like the Blackhawks probably wouldn't have made this addition to their professional level if they felt like Laurent Brossoit was going to legitimately be part of the picture. But I could be wrong. I just think it's much easier, though, sorting through how this organization is going to be in net without Laurent Brossoit as part of the picture. Because, again, assuming it's Spencer Knight and Arvid Soderblom as the 1-2 in the NHL, that would leave Drew Commesso obviously as the number one for the Rockford IceHogs. And then you have Stanislav Berezhnoy and Mitchell Weeks likely competing for the backup job. Also worth pointing out that the IceHogs in the offseason signed Owen Flores to a 1-year AHL contract, but obviously basically every other goaltender in the organization at the pro scene would have more priority over him. So very likely that he could be playing with the Indy Fuel, if I had to guess, at some point here this season. But definitely an interesting addition here by the Blackhawks. One that caught me by surprise, but at the same point in time, I don't really think it's ever too bad of a problem to have like too many goaltenders. And considering, Drew Commesso still has another year developing down in Rockford, Adam Guyan is still a long ways away from joining on in the NHL, right? He's entering his sophomore season with Minnesota Duluth, and considering how things have gone for him since the Blackhawks drafted him, I wouldn't be surprised if he spent all 4 years playing college hockey. At the very least, he's going to be playing in the NCAA for the next 2 seasons. So adding, Stanislav Berezhnoy, even though it does make the goaltender department more crowded right now, I don't think that necessarily blocks the lane for anyone here. Drew Commesso is still going to be the priority at the AHL level. Feels like he should have priority over Arvid Soderblom, even though they are expected to bring him back. Feels like could be just as a filler as the NHL backup next season, as while Soderblom did look much better last year in stretches, particularly in the first 4 to 5 months of the year, I still really don't think he's the future of the Blackhawks organization in net. And Spencer Knight and Drew Commesso, I think those are the guys that really should be holding the weight in that category. So an interesting ad by the Blackhawks, but one that I don't think is necessarily going to clog anything up in the time being, and one that doesn't really seem to have any downside, in my opinion. Berezhnoy has some good size to him, 6'4", 218 pounds. I know the VHL isn't, one of the premier pro leagues over there in Europe, but has developed nicely these last couple of seasons. I think it's a worthwhile shot here to add Stanislav Berezhnoy to the organization. He's expected to be competing, like I said, for the IceHogs backup spot here this fall in training camp, but that takes care of my full thoughts on the Blackhawks, making an interesting addition to their goaltender department, signing 22-year-old Russian Stanislav Berezhnoy to a 2-year entry-level deal. Speaking of 2-year deals getting signed, Blackhawks fans, coming up in just a moment, I'll dive into big 6'8" defenseman Louis Crevier inking a 2-year extension with the Blackhawks earlier this afternoon. Before I get into that, though, I do got to talk to you all real quick about the fine folks over at FanDuel. Summer sports are now in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, got the Open Championship going down this weekend, or even high-stakes soccer action, regardless, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. And you're already following the action, so why not make it even a little more thrilling? It's super easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. And whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or sweating a bet all the way down to the 9th inning, FanDuel really does make it feel like I'm a part of the action. And if you're new to FanDuel, then that's perfect because new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 worth of bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. All you got to do is go and open the FanDuel Sportsbook app today or go and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon in order to get started. Again, that's the FanDuel Sportsbook app that you can go and download or check out FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. Real quick, before I get into segment 2, just a quick reminder, Blackhawks fans, to please go and smash that like button down below. Subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube as well. That's 100% free and really does help me out in a massive, massive way. And even if you're someone who regularly tunes in through an audio platform, jump on over to YouTube for me, please, and hit that subscribe button. It will literally take 5 seconds out of your day. Or if you don't want to go and do that, if you just enjoy what you're tuning into on a daily basis through your audio platform, go and rate and review the podcast. 5-star rating, that always puts a big smile on my face, and that also is 100% free and helps me out in more ways than I can truly explain. But segment 2 on today's show, Blackhawks fans, the Blackhawks, I should say, took care of their first bit of RFA business here earlier this afternoon as 24-year-old defenseman Louis Crevier signed a 2-year contract extension carrying a $900,000 cap hit on a one-way deal. And Crevier, 7th-round pick for the Blackhawks back in 2020, has played in 56 games for the Blackhawks over the last 2 seasons, tallying 7 points, 3 goals, and 4 assists. He's developed honestly really nicely for a 7th-round pick. You know, just the fact that he's regularly put in NHL games for the Blackhawks his last 2 years has been really impressive. Not really known for his offensive contributions, even though I do think, the 3 goals that he scored this year are worthwhile and has a decent shot from back there on the right-hand side, which makes sense for being a 6'8" giant, but also known for that size and being able to utilize that long reach of his in the neutral zone and in the defensive zone to go and break up plays. That's always going to be Louis Crevier's bread and butter. But I do think, this is a no-brainer to bring him back on a cheap 2-year contract because how he has developed these last few years, I think you want to continue him along that path and see what he winds up, what he ends up being. You've already gotten this far, might as well continue it, and it's not like it's going to break the bank or anything here for Lou Crevier, but also just given that the Blackhawks on the right-hand side in their organization, they're pretty thin defensively. It's Sam Rinzel, Artem Levshinov, and Connor Murphy, all 3 figure to regularly be part of the NHL group this upcoming season, but I really do feel like Crevier gives the right side a little bit of depth, and he's also, I think, ready to play in that 7th defenseman role full-time for the Blackhawks, right? We saw him mostly in that spot last season. He actually only played in 15 AHL games for the Rockford IceHogs, and he's already, almost played in 120 AHL contests in his career. He's looked pretty sharp in that action down there. I don't necessarily know if there's much left for Louis Crevier to prove at that level. And just kind of looking at the Blackhawks defensive group right now, it would make much more sense for a guy like Louis Crevier, who is 24 years old, to be the seventh defenseman instead of someone like Kevin Korchinski or Ethan Del Mastro, guys who are younger than Crevier, still have some development to go through and could benefit from those top minutes down with the Rockford IceHogs. And you'd much more prefer them playing in a regular basis as opposed to just getting reps, every now and then as the seventh defenseman. Louis Crevier, not only because he's a little bit older and more mature, but also just because he's not, again, held in like a Drew Commesso, like I was talking about in segment one. He's not necessarily held in the highest regards for the Blackhawks organization. Maybe he winds up being a piece of the puzzle during the rebuild, but if he is going to be one, it's as, the sixth or seventh defenseman for this team. So it's not like the Blackhawks are going to feel terrible about him playing, only once every week or 2 weeks, if that's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles. And at the same point in time, can get in every now and again. Never know what's going to happen with Sam Renzel or Artem Levshinov. Maybe for whatever reason, they need a little bit more seasoning down in Rockford. That would allow Louis Crevier to step in on the third pairing. And also, Connor Murphy's entering the final year of his current deal, and we could wind up seeing him traded at the deadline this year. Crevier could get NHL games down the stretch of the season then. And then also Connor Murphy's kind of had some problems staying healthy throughout his time with the Blackhawks. So having another depth option on the right-hand side, especially with all the lefties the Blackhawks have on their blue line, right? I think this makes sense for a multitude of different reasons to bring Louis Crevier back. So no surprise to me here that he gets this 2-year deal. That was kind of what was expected. I think I projected right around $850,000, $900,000 for his next deal when going through a RFA preview for the Blackhawks. But speaking of Blackhawks RFAs, Crevier is the first box they check. Still have to get deals done with Wyatt Kaiser and Arvid Soderblom. It feels like Kaiser is probably the one that has the possibility to take the longest to work out here this summer, but for all of the Blackhawks RFAs, fully expect both sides to be able to come to a deal. Louis Crevier and the Hawks are the first ones to come to an agreement, though. That takes care of my thoughts on both of the Blackhawks signings that they've made here in the past couple of days. Let me know down in the comment section below, Blackhawks fans, what you feel about each of them. Do you like the addition of Stanislav Berezhnoy to the goaltender department, or do you feel like it's a little bit of overkill and creates a little bit too much of a logjam? Let me know your thoughts on Louis Crevier coming back on a cheap 2-year deal as well. But before I wrap things up, still got to dive into Isaac Howard getting dealt to the Edmonton Oilers and whether or not this was a miss by general manager Kyle Davidson. But first, I do got to talk to you all about Indeed. You just realized that your business needed to hire someone like yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Well, it's easy. Just use Indeed, because when it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites, because Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. So skip all of those unnecessary questions and steps, because now you can speed up your hiring process and also get a $75 sponsored job credit by just visiting Indeed.com/lockedon, and make sure to let them know that you heard about Indeed on this very podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Real quick, just want to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. For your second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where there is no offseason, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. And you can easily find Locked On NHL now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, a trade that went down recently between the Edmonton Oilers and the Tampa Bay Lightning that I have yet to break down on the show, is one that involved former Bolts first-round pick, actually their only first-round pick during this decade since 2020, and, of course, reigning Hobey Baker Trophy Award winner is the top player in college hockey, Isaac Howard. And probably a little over a month ago now, maybe even 2 months ago, right at the beginning of the offseason, there's been speculation around Isaac Howard for a long, long time. And considering, he was the Hobey Baker Award winner that I've seen earlier in the summer, of course, I saw several Blackhawks fans say, the Blackhawks should be interested. They should try to go and make a run at Isaac Howard. So I made a full episode dedicated to just that. And when breaking down, whether the Blackhawks should show interest, in my opinion, I said it would make sense for a handful of different reasons, not only because Isaac Howard has been excellent for Michigan State these last couple of years, but also he would enter a situation where it's all about the prospects. He would likely, again, if he would be willing to join on with the Blackhawks, he would be entering a situation where he would likely be among the top priorities. It's going to be a prospect-heavy season for the Blackhawks, so he would fit right in, and he would also probably fit right in the dressing room as well, considering, he knows a lot of these Blackhawks young prospects. He played at Michigan State with Artem Levshinov, also played on the United States development program and the United States World Juniors teams with guys like Frank Nazar, Oliver Moore, Sam Rinzel, basically all of these guys outside of like Connor Bedard and Anton Frondel, who are at the forefront of this Blackhawks prospect pool. Isaac Howard has some pretty good chemistry and has played with basically all of those guys. So I think there was a decent case for the Blackhawks to show some interest. And I'm sure there were lots of teams interested in a guy like Isaac Howard, but never obviously wound up transpiring here this summer. And then after what we saw the Blackhawks go and what they did at the NHL draft, where Kyle Davidson basically only selected forwards with size, it was clear that was his mentality and his emphasis here this summer was to add more players with size and also guys with size and a skill combo to the forward group. And after seeing what they did in the NHL draft, it didn't surprise me that they never were really reported to have made a heavy run at someone like Isaac Howard, because he would be another undersized player inside their top 6 or top 9. And they just have a lot of those guys already. And, a guy like, there were multiple guys in the NHL draft who I thought the Blackhawks would be interested in, but they elected to go with guys who just had a little bit of a larger frame instead. So it's clear that Kyle Davidson wasn't all that interested in taking on another, skill player who isn't above 6 foot. And Isaac Howard's only 5'11", 190 pounds. So I get why GM KD never made a run at him. But honestly, considering that it only cost Sam O'Reilly, who was the 32nd overall pick for Edmonton in the 2024 NHL draft, like that's a pretty low asking price. And from what I've heard, sounded like Tampa preferred to take on a prospect as opposed to like a late first round draft pick, which is a little bit of a gamble there. They would have rather liked to have taken their choice of prospect. I don't know if there was necessarily someone, if it would have cost the Blackhawks Merrick Vanacker to go and get Isaac Howard or Merrick Vanacker in like a second round pick, I would have gone and done that. And I get Isaac Howard is under 6 foot, but more skill on the wing for the Blackhawks inside the top 9. I don't really think they have enough, at least at the time earlier on this summer when it felt more likely for them to make this type of deal. If that would have been the asking price, I would have been in for that. So kind of stinks that doesn't feel like Kyle Davidson made a real run at someone like Isaac Howard, who, as I mentioned, has played with a lot of these Blackhawks prospects, obviously has been excellent in college hockey these last 2 years, and also would be coming into a situation that I think he'd be really comfortable in. We don't know if he would have been willing to sign his ELC with the Blackhawks, so maybe this conversation is all for naught. That is definitely worth pointing out, but I kind of do wish GMKD would have made a little bit of a harder run at someone like Isaac Howard. I know doesn't necessarily fit what they were looking to do here this summer, but it feels like would have been a good buy low opportunity to go and get someone who would make sense for this forward group, but all for naught now, because of course, Isaac Howard has been traded to the Edmonton Oilers, signed his entry-level contract. Maybe he'll be opening up next year on the top line with Connor McDavid. Maybe he was holding out for that type of opportunity. I don't know, but it's came and went for Isaac Howard. Kind of stinks, like I said, that it doesn't sound like the Blackhawks made more of a run, but it is what it is. They clearly wanted to go in a different direction for their forward group here this summer. That's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, though. Thank you all again, as always, for joining me on the show. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way, you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. Till tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Thursdays. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.